Today we are at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, and we are joined by Dr. Emily Coffey, who oversees all of the conservation work here at the gardens. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you to tell us about where we are today and where we are specifically in the gardens.
Yes, so we are in our conservation greenhouse. This is a location in which we are preparing plants to go back in the wild for reintroduction. So part of the mission here at Atlanta Botanical Garden and our Conservation Research Department is to conserve both plants and ecosystems across the southeastern United States as well as the Caribbean. So this is our conservation garden, and these are basically representations of plants that we have like across the southeastern United States. We have federally listed species in this garden as well as very rare and imperiled species. So it's a pretty awesome garden. Obviously, the majority of the plants that you see right now, these tall pitchers, these are carnivorous plants, and these are carnivorous meaning they actually require intake of insects to be able to grow, because they need the nutrients from the insects. So the insects basically go inside the pitcher. We can show you inside the pitcher, and then inside those pitchers there are actually enzymes that help break down the insects so that they can actually gain nutrients, because these grow on extremely nutrient poor soils. They're often very sandy and don't have a lot of organic matter, not a lot of nitrogen, so the plants have to gather that other ways.
In here we've got 5 species throughout this whole area, and then hybrids at the bottom.
Pitcher plants, they occur in wetland ecosystems, and so we work with the entire ecosystem to conserve this particular plant that happens to be rare. This is Sarracenia leucophila.
Wait, say that one more time. Nice and slow.
Sarracenia leucophila, or the white-top pitcher plant. And so it is a carnivorous plant, and what that means is that it actually has enzymes and little sticky, this particular one has hairs that help trap insects that go down into the pitcher. It can then, with those specialized enzymes, break down the insects and absorb the nutrients from those insects to survive. And this is just one of you can see sort of here in the collection we have various different species of pitcher plants. These are all these pitcher plants.
Are these as well?
These are also, so these are actually it has a slightly different adaptive method of capturing. There's actually water inside with enzymes and additional hairs that keep the plants down. And then
So the water follows in here, and then the insects get eaten and digested.
So actually, these don't. The hoods help protect these particular this particular species from getting too much water in it. It's just that the insects are attracted to scents and odors. These purpureas, they actually monosis. They are getting water in, and then the insects fall in. You also have ones like the sundews over here. These are a Drosera or sundew, and these have sticky little little projections that actually capture the insects by just landing on there. So flies and gnats and things like that will actually land on those. Very cool. These particular species, these are also capture insects. And what we do when we're trying to conserve any of these ecosystems and plants, we're looking at how they all fit together. So that's one of the really important things that we do at ABG that I think is really useful. These are part of a system, and it's a system for the leucophillas, for these white tops. They are fire driven, so they're in what we call a pyrogenic system, which means fire driven. And so we're helping restore some of those natural ecosystem functions and natural disturbances to those environments. And we could talk about all the different species. We have about 200 species that we work with in the southeastern United States, so we do quite a bit, and our specialties are carnivorous plants and orchids, and most of our orchids right now are actually not in this greenhouse, but another nursery. We also have a 3.5 acre conservation safeguarding nursery that's in Gainesville, Georgia, at Atlanta Botanical Gardens, Gainesville. And that's a place where we keep any of the species that we're going to keep for long-term safeguarding. So it's called ex situ safeguarding, or a long-term where we're basically not going to be utilizing those plants for restoration. These are going back in the wild. Those plants are meant to be kept for genetic resources and for a long-term backup in case something happened to the wild population, because we actually see that happen quite often, where we lose an entire population due to hog damage, so invasive species, due to habitat destruction. So we've gone and found Walmarts put on top of, our plants, and they're all gone. That whole system is gone. All the way to overuse of herbicide spraying, where we lose all the species due to too much herbicide that actually knocks these out quite easily.
What happens when we lose one of these in the chain?
So that's the really, really upsetting thing. When we lose just one piece of this beautiful puzzle that is this ecosystem that functions really beautifully, all of a sudden you have changes in hydrology. So you end up not having the same water filtration process that is ending up down the line making clean water for particular systems. One of the places is Deer Lake State Park down in Florida, and that's a seepage wetland that we're working on. And in that system, we're finding that without these species, there's the loss of biodiversity, and without biodiversity, then all of a sudden you're stuck with a system that becomes sort of a monoculture almost, and that system can't adapt well to change. There's the lack of resiliency. There's a lack of biodiversity that really impacts the whole system.
So it's the same thing we see in humans.
It is.
When we don't have the diversity that we need, and we see a single idea or a single concept or a single focus, then we always have the same predictable outcome.
Correct.
And that diversity actually adds to the improvement of answers and the outcome of those, right? I always say the gestalt improves the final outcome and decision. One of the things that we talk a lot about in government, I call it Rubik's Cube decision making. That when you make one change, it actually causes a ripple effect all the way around the cube, because they're all connected to one another. And it's the same thing then when we start to talk about the environment. If we make just one change, the ripple effect is incredibly problematic. On the other hand, if we make one adjustment and improvement, we actually can create improvement as well all the way through the chain. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And so the question becomes, what are those 1, 2, or 3 adjustments that we could make that would have a ripple effect of improvement across the system?
Definitely. So reduction in both herbicide and pesticide use, because these species and diverse systems are very susceptible to overuse of herbicides. We lose diversity very quickly if we spray with herbicides. The spraying of pesticides also is really problematic, because all of these plants need to be pollinated, and pollinators are insects. And once we spray pesticides to kill off our insects, we end up losing all of that diversity of insects, that then we lose our diversity in our pollinators. And finally, we can do things like planting natives in our garden that are well adapted to our soils, that are well adapted to our weather patterns and weather conditions. And by increasing native plants and reducing our invasive or non-native plants, we can actually make big impacts in small little areas like our backyards.
Right, we listened to some of the conservation work that's happening in Florida, in the St. Johns River district, along with the University of Florida. They've actually created an app that you can use to determine what is native for your space and how it is that you can populate it and make sure that it is attractive and that it is working with your homeowners association requirements. So it's a very innovative way to approach this goal, because for most of us, we don't actually know what it is that is native. There's just been so much here, and so we don't always know what it is that we're looking for. So I don't know, does Georgia have something like that as well?
We do. So we have, one really amazing organization is called the GPCA, or the Georgia Rare Plant Conservation Alliance. and that is a group of individuals from around the state that are working together to save imperiled plant species. And one of the initiatives they have is listing the native plant growers, so that you know, like, I want to plant some native plants in my backyard, and they have a list of nurseries, and they also have recommendations on what you can plant. So that can be really impactful, because of course you have to follow the homeowner association regulations, and there are many plants that you can plant that are very small, that are not big, will not look, weedy, but that you can actually make really beautiful, aesthetically pleasing gardens that are still following the best practices of water consumption and also the native practices to increase the diversity.
Great. And where would somebody find that?
So if you go, if you go on the website and you look up Georgia Plant Conservation Alliance, you can also look, there are numerous, there's the Georgia, oh my goodness, GAP. Sorry.
Is that the acronym GAP?
Yes, Greater Atlanta Pollinator Pollinator Program Partnership. Oh my gosh, the Greater Atlanta Pollinator Partnership, and that's GAPP.org, and that has a large list of all of the different plants that you can use in organizations to get them from.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.